As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen and Katherine have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, episode 7. I can't believe it, Jen. Episode 7. We have not been so busy that we can't prepare for I'm so busy. Today we're talking about ditching that busyness badge and finding time for what actually matters. So excited to be with you today.
So excited to be here too. I've got a little bit of a cold, as we were talking about in the pre-show, but I'm going to be battling through it. So if there's a little bit of raspiness, just take it as sexiness.
I'm taking it as sexiness. It's absolutely sexy. We're going with it. And as we were talking about in the pre-show, our bodies just tell us things. You know, is it the busyness that has created the cold? Who knows? Who knows? But I'm just glad you're well enough to be here today, because I can't start my Mondays off without you. And I know our listeners are really excited as well. So thanks for getting out of bed and being here.
Always worth getting out of bed, Katherine. This is like the best part of my week. You know that.
I know. Me too. And that's why I love that we start this on Mondays. I love this so much. And I want to dive in because your Facebook group, Women of HR Support Group, you always do such a great job of doing some sort of a poll or doing some sort of engagement the week before we actually produce our podcast. And so I just want to shout out to your listeners, just applaud you again for the connectivity that you've created in your group. It's really incredible. It's really heartwarming. And I am dying to know what you thought about the information in the poll, all of the sharing, all of the comments, when it comes to why our listeners are so busy, why our listeners are feeling so busy. Not like this theoretical, not like we're listening to other podcasts and why everybody else is so busy, but why are HR women so freaking busy? What did you hear?
Everything. Well, I did. So what I typically do is I'll do like a multiple choice poll. So the question I asked on the multiple choice poll last week was, if you were to really gut check yourself and be really honest, how much time would you be able to carve out of your week to be able to do the things that truly matter? And what was really surprising, I was curious to see what we would see, but what was really surprising, so let me back up a second. So I gave 4 responses. The first response was none. I am completely maxed out, can't do a thing. And then I went from there and said, I think I could get 15 minutes. I think I could get an hour. I think it could go above an hour. The number one answer, max out. So there are a lot of people that are just overworked over everything and really truly feel at their core that they have given everything that they can. That says a lot. That says a lot in terms of the amount of weight that are on the shoulders of the ladies out there. And then the other 3 responses kind of were mixed, right? I think that there were quite a few that were honest about that they could get up more than 60 minutes. And then there were some that said, yeah, I could probably get 15, 30. But really the idea was, if we really were kind of being aware and honest with ourselves about what does really matter, like what are our values, what's missing, then I think that that's the thing that we really want to talk about today is like, what are the things that truly matter? Yeah. And are we living in areas right now that maybe don't matter so much? And that's what, we were talking pre-show as well, just about like that gut check that we must do within ourselves for us to be able to break out of that. So that was poll number one. And then
Yeah.
you went and did something super cool that got a ton of responses where you asked more of an open-ended question. Remind me the open-ended question you asked, Katherine.
Oh gosh, it was something about let it go. It was about last week. I think I posted Friday night. I did post Friday night and said, what made your week so freaking busy? And it was like a fill in the blank. And what I noticed was the answers were all over the board, which I just love. You know, some women were commenting, I rolled out HRIS and payroll at the same time, or it's open. I was surprised to see some open enrollments. I've never done open enrollment in March, so I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Bonuses, trying to figure out bonus. I mean, just the busyness that we all experience, and the comments were. My heart broke for some of the comments because I was there. And again, it's so interesting. I sort of go back to, for me, the state of busyness I lived in and the pace and the frenetic approach that I took for 25 years. And that quite honestly led to my burnout. So I was like, you know, I'm like looking at it through my lens and my heart just goes out to the women. It really does. What about you? What did you think of all of the responses that you saw?
That there's a lot of weight on a lot of shoulders.
Yeah.
And that we are in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing and having the right
Yeah.
conversations.
Oh,
I
I
think
love
that
that.
was the thing for me, and the same that you felt as well, is that, you know, there's a lot of people who feel worn out, and whatever we can do to help support in that. So I think, you know, hearing all that and recognizing that there is no one size fits all, right? Like you said, you
No.
saw 70 something response. I don't remember the last time I checked, but
Yeah.
they were all different. I mean, there were a couple open enrollment and there were a couple this and a couple that, but it's all different. And so that's I think the real thing that I hope we get out of today is it's never going to be an off the shelf answer when it comes to being too busy and being overwhelmed and burned out. It's never going to be. And so the best thing that we can ever do is become more aware of ourselves,
Yep.
and really starting to kind of recognize how we can start making those changes within so they can really make a difference and show up outside externally. So I think that's what I really got out of that most, is there's so much I think that is the frustrations that are external, right? There's this and there's that and all the uncontrollables. And that, I
Yes.
think, you know from your coaching, and I know from my coaching, that's the easiest and quickest thing to lead to insanity, is when we get so caught up in all the externals that it becomes our reality. And, I think that that is, what I was sensing from that, is there's a lot of that, which is very, normal and natural. And it's also doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be, right? And so that, I think, is what I'm excited for today.
Well, I want to dive deeper into that. You hit on something really interesting. You were talking about like almost like the external influences, the external variables outside of ourselves. You know, when we are rolling out a new software, when open enrollment's happening, when our boss is asking us to, those are external factors. And then there's our inner game. You know, what the choices we make. So what are your thoughts on what comes first? You know, is it both? Is it one? Is it the other? What is actually creating this busyness in your experience?
The last thing I want to do is have anyone out there mad at me, but like, my answer is it starts from within. It starts from within. So
Ooh.
both you and I have years and years and years of experience of being in the grind that so many of us are in, to push ourselves to exhaustion and burnout, and having that be a pattern that repeats
Mhm.
itself year after. You spoke, before we came on live, about a spin cycle. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
and those types of patterns that repeat ourselves are the thing that, when you start to do the inner work, whatever that looks like for you, when you start to do that, that's
Mhm.
what you start to loosen and break apart.
Oof.
And that has been everything for me, and has really, I think, helped shift how I view those external circumstances that at one time, I think I'm living proof that, the role that I'm currently in, as an HR manager right now, I don't I no, I'm positive that I would never have been able to function in as high of a capacity as I can today if I
Yeah.
had not done the inner work. And that
Yes.
includes busyness, it includes overwhelm, it includes exhaustion. The inner work is, I think, everything, because you don't let those external things bother you. It kind of can just roll right off because it's not about you. So, yeah, I think my answer will be the inner work, but it has been something that's been progressive only within the last few years. So if the answer is different for anyone out there, it's okay, because I think that's where, the process comes in. What about for you?
Well, I love that you say, if somebody's answer is different for them. And it's so funny because my answer is a little bit different. I love this. I mean, for me, it's been, and I'm an open book. I talk openly and honestly about my past victim mentality that I didn't even know I had. So I think that's why my answer is different, because for me, the busyness came from external variables. It came from, I have back to back meetings. It came from my boss asking me to do more projects. It came from all of these external asks. But where I totally agree with you is the empowerment and the where you do gain some sort of sense or control, or true control, is the inner game. It's in our response to the external factors versus reacting, and that is, to me, the greatest knowledge that I've come to just in the last couple of years, truly and honestly. And what you just shared, I think about, I call it the Linda, my partner's mother. We've been together for 9 years. I asked him recently if I could call him my husband, and he said yes. So I may just start calling him my husband, even though we're not married. But his mother was in the finance field, I think, for about 25, 30 years. And when her boss used to come to her and say, hey, here's a new project, here's something else I want you to work on, she would quite literally pull out a list from her desk as her boss was standing there and say, great, I love having that information. So excited to work on it. Currently, I'm working on 1, 2, and 3. Where does this go in my prioritization? So how she responded really helped influence, and, let's be honest, really restrict that busyness. Sort of, when you think about a faucet, instead of just having it flowing all the time and coming at you and the water spraying at you from every direction, she created a system that allowed for a drip. And it was all in her response, which I thought was really cool. So I call it the Linda, which just cracks me up. And it worked for her. But like you said, everybody's solution is going to be different. There's no right or wrong. It's what's right for you and right for the situation. What's right for the situation.
Absolutely. I love the Linda.
The Linda. I love Linda, and I love the Linda. She's amazing. She's
Oh my
amazing.
gosh.
Well,
That's
speaking
so funny.
of, yeah.
Okay. I was just at a pool hall the other day, and like right in the middle of nowhere in this pool hall was this poster that said Linda Listen, and there was the little boy, if you've never seen that YouTube video, and I just laughed and laughed, took a picture of it. I'm like,
Linda. Well, I love that you're finding time for what matters and going to a pool hall. Let's talk about that. A little fun in your life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we got to, right?
You
We
have to.
absolutely have to. Yeah. But what you bring up is like, I think something that I love it so much is just the idea of having within yourself some way of having that prioritization of what really truly matters and checking in on
Yes.
that regularly. I
Yeah.
think for me, one of the things that I really recognize is, and we've talked about this before, but I used to be like a very, very heavy drinker. And so I
Yeah.
think the end of the day wrap up, the types of things that I do now that I didn't do before because I just needed to get to the end of the day so I could wash it away. You know what I'm talking about? But
Yeah.
that,
I do know
yeah,
what you're talking about.
but that now I think has been such a big thing for me. But I think in my early years, I
Yeah.
was just functioning on autopilot so much of the time. I was just powering through and I
Yes.
wasn't taking those breaks to do like the Linda list or whatever it might be. But I think
Yes.
that is such a great point because in some way we have to recalibrate regularly. And if
Yeah.
we're not doing that regular recalibration, again, however that looks like, that's where things start to feel out of control. And that's where I was over and over and over again for so many years.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you say so many years, how long do you think that span was? Did it come in and out for you? Or was it, when you reflect back on it, was it kind of the minute you started in HR until, I don't know, when?
I think lifetime. I mean, I think
Yeah.
throughout my lifetime, I
Yeah.
think I was outside of myself in terms of being conscious of, what really mattered to me and then prioritizing, thoughtfully. But I think being in HR definitely has been just dramatically shaken me up. I think it's shaken a
Yes.
lot of people up, especially those who are, HR departments of one, which is what I was for many, many, many years.
Same.
I
Yep.
think that type of role is something that puts you almost in trauma response every day.
Yes.
When you don't have the support, when you don't have the guidance, in every situation and every role is going to be different. But if you're in that type of role where you feel like you're all by yourself, that's something that can be really, really difficult. And I think for me, as I started to get to, so I ended up, one HR, department of one role after another until I finally was in a role where I was the HR department of one of 300 in a hospitality hotel environment. And
Wow.
my first year was the worst professional year that I think I ever had. And I will
Mm,
never forget that I worked with as a peer, our director of food and beverage.
okay.
And at the time this was like, May, something like that. And she was going on a retreat, like a spiritual retreat. Never heard of anything like it. She was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go on the spiritual retreat. And at
Oh,
the time, we were in the process of adding on another restaurant, bringing on a
yes.
new executive chef. I'm sitting here as HR department one trying to figure all that out while there was an investigation at one property because housekeepers were not behaving themselves. So anyway, like I was at a point where I was completely spun out and overwhelmed, as so many people in HR are. Here, this director of food and beverage goes on the spiritual retreat, came back, and the way that she even looked at me was different. The way that she walked was different. The way that she breathed was different. And immediately I like tuned into that and I said,
Mm.
tell me more. What is this? And the first word that she said was something that changed my life. And she said, meditation. And she and I started chatting. That was the first time meditation was even brought into my awareness. This was in 2015. And, at the time I'm like, what the, that, what? And we started talking about like just breathing and breath. And she talked to me about the
Yes.
retreat and what they did and how they sat in silence for like
Yes.
hours and hours at a time. I'm like, what? Like it felt so foreign to me. But here this person was, she wasn't somebody that I saw as like a tree hugger, a hippie, or something completely out of my
So
reach.
interesting.
This was something who was, somebody who was, my peer as a director and somebody who was taking this time to take care of herself. And what was so fascinating about it is that she comes back from this retreat, and it was something that she did every year. We worked together for about 4 years, and we still
Okay.
talk all the time. And for the first few weeks after coming back from this retreat, she was like light, floating, right? And then it kind of settled down to the point where reality kind of settles in, it kind of locks in, where it was still like you were talking about with Linda earlier, clear, focused, directed, all of that kind of remained all throughout. And, I think the biggest thing that I learned from that is she said, it has to happen daily. It has to be the daily, time that we put into ourselves that
Yeah.
ultimately is like an investment in a piggy bank. And so beginning in 2015 was, I feel like the beginning of my journey. It took many years after that where it
Yeah.
really finally connected and clicked in. But that was a game changer for me, where somebody walked away at a time it was busier than I've ever felt in my life, came back as a different person. And I could see myself in that immediately. I was like, yes, that is what I'm going, that is something to aspire to be. So it was a long story, a long answer, but that was something that I think shifted me in every way, and at a time where I needed it, and I think I was prepared to like pay attention.
It just, yeah, I just got so sucked into your story that I have no idea what I'm supposed to talk about next. No, really, I think what's really impressive to me is it sounds like this really came into your life in 2015, which can't believe that was 9 years ago. And yesterday, you and I posted on Facebook about a meditation that I had just done in the morning. And it was a Jay Shetty meditation. And you popped on the Facebook group and said, "Oh my God, I just did the same meditation." And it was such a good one yesterday. And I think the other
It was
thing,
hard, but it
it
was
was
good.
hard. It was hard. And it was 8 minutes. We're
Yeah.
talking about 8 minutes. And when sometimes I feel like when we think we're so busy that we can't carve out 8 minutes, when we're feeling that busy, that's the exact time that we need to find those 8 minutes or 4 minutes or 2 minutes. It doesn't even have to be a full 8 minutes. But your meditation practice, I had a similar experience. I won't go into it, but yeah, meditation, taking it's really changed. I do it first thing in the morning, and it really sets my day up for success. And it sounds a little bit cheesy as it's coming out of my mouth. I'm judging my own words here, but it works. So once you find what works, you stick with it.
Embrace the cheese.
What's that?
We got to embrace the cheese, because
Embrace the change.
it's cheesy, sure. Like, I think that the stigma attached to some of this stuff is so silly, but it's real. I remember
Yeah.
when I first started a job. This has been 6, 7 years ago, but it was after I started, with meditation a little bit, and then I started in a new role. And I had brought the idea of wanting to do like meditation, or having some form of, mindfulness within the team that I was joining. And it was flat out rejected so quickly. And I think, and then I ended up being there for about 3 years. And by the time I left, it wasn't anymore, right? And
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's about like just opening our minds to something that might be a little different than what we know and what we're comfortable with and what we're used to. And meditation is really that. Like, so many people, I don't know about you, Catherine, but so many people say, "Oh, that's, I just can't sit still. I can't, I'm just not someone who can sit still." And, I get it. I get it. As somebody who is diagnosed ADHD, I get it. But it also has been a complete life and game changer for me. And I know the same for you, Catherine. And it's like, it's just a matter of like getting yourself into that groove
Yes.
and forcing yourself into something that may initially feel a little bit uncomfortable, but is good for you, right? That's
Yeah.
why we brush our teeth. It's why we take a shower, like we do all these things. Just do it.
Just
Right?
do it. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that is the thing. It's for our listeners. We can indulge in books, we can indulge in podcasts, we can say, oh, well, meditation, cool, that sounds great. But if you don't do it, if you don't practice it, if you don't try new things on, my brother's a scientist, so I always think about it, putting my scientist hat on, trying new things. And it's not a one and done. I have a really good girlfriend who wanted to lose some pounds. So she had heard about something that if you stop drinking, I don't know, it was this whole thing that involved not drinking. And she quit after a week because she didn't see the pounds come off fast enough. We have to stick with it for a little bit of time, and we have to try new things. Wild. Wild. By the way, if anybody is watching the live stream, we do have a listener who mentioned she wants the link to the meditation. We will absolutely put that in our Facebook groups today. And thank you for asking for it. Of course, we're happy to share that. I do want to switch gears a little bit. Jen and I are both passionate about lifting up, supporting, elevating women specifically. So, Jen, I'm curious if you think that there is a difference between men's busyness and women's busyness. Do you think there's a difference there?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, don't make me cry.
Oh God, I don't even know where to start. Absolutely. I think it's just the one word answer that'll shut that down, but not shut it down. Yeah, I mean, after being in the corporate business world now for, 25 years plus, have we still have growth that's needed, right? Like there's no doubt about that. There's the progress is undeniable, and the progress is amazing over the last 20 years especially. And like let's continue to see that happen. I think women in particular, especially in HR, like I want to see us step up. Like my goal with this podcast, my goal as a human is to help other women in HR step up and feel like we can be just as confident in any Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, right? And how can we do that? I think it's through the practice of, building that muscle of confidence and courage and bravery and all of these things that sometimes we hold back. And so that's a whole nother thing. But busyness in particular, I think is gosh, what was it like? Oh my gosh, I'm totally not gonna do that. Somebody and I were laughing the other day because we were talking about the response to the State of the Union. I don't know if anyone has seen it. I'm not going to get political, but what was funny about it that they had picked up and they had noticed is the gal who gave the response for the State of the Union was in a kitchen, and it gave off this sense of that's where we belong, right? The women in the kitchen and the idea of make sure we go back to where we are. A lot of these messages and a lot of this, it's still out there. It's still prevalent. It's still, it's still worked within our culture, and it's going to take long time to continue to break free of this. And so whatever, however that shows up. But I think the busyness piece is men for decades and decades and decades, if not centuries, have been programmed to learn how to take advantage of rest and take advantage of, they have it pretty dialed in terms of balance for the most part. If you look at statistics or you look at data around men versus women and how stressed and overwhelmed and burnt out, it's pretty staggering. So I think that in of itself just goes and tells you that this has not been an overnight thing. It's actually been programmed in us for decades and decades, if not generations. And so I think that that's something that gives me some peace to be able to say, you know what, this is not something that we inherited overnight. And it's something that I see the glass breaking all over the freaking place. So I'm okay with it. How about you? Like, where do you sit in this whole thing about men and women and busyness?
I mean, I echo everything you've said. It's in socialization. It's women are socialized to work harder, to sort of compete in a man's world. It's just the truth. And then layered on top of that is women are taught to play nice. So we are expected to show up as these nice people in the workplace. And if you're direct, then you're a bitch. I mean, there's so much to it. So what I also find is, we talked about this a little bit in episode 6, but the difference between volume versus value. And I feel like as HR women, at least this was in my experience, but I hear this from my clients too. When we're supposed to be giving an update, we give a laundry list. We give a laundry list of things. I'm working on X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, 7, 4, 8, open enrollment, new program, blah, blah, blah. And I have heard, and I've heard this with my male clients, that their check-ins with their bosses aren't about that. It's more about quality. It's about value. So I'm not saying we have to change. I'm not saying we have to become more like men whatsoever. But if you just notice as a woman, Jen's like, hell no. If you just notice as a woman that you're in this sort of frenetic energy, that you're going, you can choose to stop the go or slow down the go. And I actually have a client who is so cute. She says, he's my house husband. I have a house husband. So she's not just the primary breadwinner, she is the breadwinner. Okay. And she also says she's hardwired to be busy. She believes it is in her, quite honestly, in her DNA. And when she gets home, she feels guilty. She's like, my husband's been home all day. I feel guilty if I don't go right to him and spend time with him. Yet I'm pretty freaking exhausted from my work all the time. So she's busy. She commutes. She's busy at work. She commutes again. And then she feels as though she has to be there for her husband. And what we've started working on, so she just doesn't feel so busy all the time, is we use the cue of her getting home. She gets on her Peloton for 20 minutes the minute she gets home. So we're experimenting with that. She's finding the time to lessen that busyness. And spending time with her husband is very important. It does matter to her, but so does her health. I mean, this woman's blood pressure was going through the roof because of this busyness, because of her thought that I'm hardwired to work like this. So if that sounds familiar, busyness is not in your DNA. Hardwired for busyness, that is just a thought. And when we see that it's just a thought, and sometimes we just don't even see it that it's a thought because it is such a long-term standing belief, that's where our power is. When we can just start to shift that a little bit. And again, experiment. If you're like, no, meditation, I've already tried it, it doesn't work, great, try something else. I don't know. I just started thinking about talking about the difference between men and women. You know, it's only been, I don't even know in the last how many decades that we've done that flop, that women can be not just the primary breadwinner, but sole breadwinner. So a lot has changed in a very short amount of time. And yet I feel like the socialization hasn't necessarily caught up. So we just have to say, you know what? For me, Katherine, I'm a 48-year-old grown woman. It doesn't matter how I was socialized. How am I choosing to be today? Am I going to continue with this busyness? I told Jen, but you know, when we were prepping for the podcast, I was a walking tornado. Those were my exact words. I was stressed out all the time. I was go all the time for my entire HR career in the 9-to-5 realm. And it just doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. So Jen, I'm curious if we can get really specific. Like, is there like a very specific memory for you where the busyness really impacted your mental, physical, or emotional health? Is there a standout that you recall? Or if not, walk us through what it did kind of used to look like for you and how that impacted your health.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up a little bit earlier the story of the gal that I worked with at the hotel who went on the retreat. And one thing that happened a couple of weeks after she came back, I'll never forget it, is I was at my limit, right? She's the one who went on
Mm.
the spiritual retreat, not me. And as she came back and I was able to see something so different than what I'd ever seen before. And here I was still going through my hectic, frantic tornado pace. And a
Yes.
couple of weeks later, we were working through something where we had one of the chefs that we were working with and was having some tremendous behavioral problems that with the
Mm.
stereotypical angry chef situation.
Okay.
And she and I were sitting down and talking it through. And I finally just, without prompting, I don't know where it came from, just started to cry. And this flood came over me. And I think, having that moment where I felt safe enough. And we talked about this a little bit last week about like having those individuals in our lives where we can feel safe enough to release what it is that's been bottling up for days, weeks, months, years,
Yeah.
whatever, whatever it is like that was such a major thing. And what was interesting is that happened and then it didn't happen again for a long, long time. And I was still in my, my bubble and not quite, kind of breaking free out of it, not yet doing daily meditation and anything like that. But it's interesting, I think, and everyone can relate to this sometimes when we finally have some kind of release, right? Whether it's a good cry, a good hug, a good run, there is something about that that can just help us become a little bit more focused, right? And a little bit more
Mm.
clear. And that, I think was such a beginning for me of being able to see more clearly, right? Like not only seeing someone else so different and so getting it in a way that I wasn't quite there, but then also being able to see how much freer and liberated I felt when I was able to just release it all out. And then at the end of it, when I had that good cry, she and I looked at each other and said, okay, let's go talk to him. And from there, we went and did what we needed to do. And I think sometimes we just need to be able to have that outlet, whatever that looks like. And that I think was the beginning of, I think, the shift for me. And I think for everybody, I mean, me saying it took 9 years, that feels so exciting to be able to say, right? Like for some that might feel like such a long time. Oh, your awakening journey or your, enlightenment or whatever took that long. And I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Same.
it
Yes.
absolutely did. And so, but I think that to finally have those first sparks 9 years ago, I am so, so grateful for, and still so grateful for Ava today for what she brought into my life. So, what about you? I mean, where do you feel like it started to kind of shift for you and you were able to, kind of see, yeah, see differently in terms of what busyness could be for you?
Mine was not 9 years ago. And similarly, I have no regrets. Mine was only 2 years ago. And I am so grateful that I've had the life I have because I really do believe that things happen for me. Truly, I don't think things are happening to me. Again, I had to do a lot of work on my victim mentality. But the evidence for me of my busyness impacting my health, this is probably TMI. I had hemorrhoids at the age of 25. My doctor said, I have never seen hemorrhoids on a 25-year-old woman, right? I started in HR at the age of 22. I was an HR manager and I was go, 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 go until the age of 46. Okay. Diagnosed autoimmune disease at the age of 23. I grew up, my father was a cardiologist, so I grew up with Western medicine, but I did go to, I worked at my first HR job was in a one-stop shop health and wellness facility. It was 77,000 square feet. It was really cool. And there was a doctor named Dr. Lee Beamer. He did energy work. I was like, oh, I'm going to go check this out. He drew my blood. He like tested all these things. And he told me, I was probably in my mid 20s. He said, you have the liver of a 70-year-old. So as Jen opened up about her relationship with alcohol, I have a very similar relationship with alcohol. I'm now alcohol free. So there were so many warning signs that my busyness was impacting my health. Diagnosed with general anxiety disorder in my early 40s. I mean, I just did not make the connection that I was making myself sick on so many different levels, my physical health, my mental health. And 2 years ago, I was stung, long story short, I was stung by wasps all over my body in the middle of the backcountry in Colorado. I could have died. It was a pretty dire situation. That was my wake-up call. And then a couple months later, I tore my ACL skiing. And the first thought I had was, thank God. Most people, when they tear their knee, they're really upset. And I was so happy because I knew it was another hard stop in my life for me to say, you've got to stop this walking tornado. It is not working. You have got to figure this out. So for me, it was, and I think about this and I talk a lot about this. For me, I have to hit rock bottom. And sometimes I choose the thought of, I wish I weren't that way, but I'm also okay with it because it's happening for me and it starts me off in the right direction. It really does.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and for being so vulnerable when something, is a little uncomfortable to share, but I absolutely
Hemorrhoids are uncomfortable, Jen. They are.
hemorrhoids are uncomfortable. And there are others out there who can very much relate, whether or not it's chronic stress or chronic this or chronic that. I think those types of things are very, very normal and just increasing in, commonality.
Yeah.
And I think what you said was so, so powerful. And I think exactly a similar experience that I have around that rock bottom piece. And
Yeah.
it's really there's something to be said about finally having that moment where you're like, okay, I'm listening, I'm paying attention, I see. And sometimes it does take that face in the ground moment. And I definitely have me one of those as well, which we'll talk about in the future. But I
Yeah.
think that, I thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I think there are
Always.
so many, myself included, who can very much relate to that moment of just saying, this has to stop.
This has to stop. This has to stop. Yeah.
Well,
So,
congratulations.
oh, well, thank you. And to you too. And to you too. I can't wait to hear more specifics from you in the future. I know you want to talk about that at some other time. I'm super curious. Do you approach busyness differently now? I mean, I know the meditation is a huge part of your life. I'm just curious if you see it very differently from 5 years ago, if there are specific things that you do on top of meditation. I mean, how is your approach to busyness different now than it was? Maybe it's the 9-year mark. Maybe that's the time frame we want to look at.
Yeah, I think, if I were to go back even 5 years, I think the
Yeah.
biggest difference for me now compared to even 5 years ago is this awareness piece and being dialed in to what I'm really feeling about things. And there are times where I think we're so accustomed and programmed and, all of that to just be the doers, right? And
Yeah.
to go and to not question and to not ask, especially as women, right?
Oof.
And what I've really learned over these last several years is to start asking more, to start questioning more, to start being curious, to start checking in. Things that have not been traditionally comfortable or easy for me have become something that I have practiced and practiced and practiced. So that to me is by and far the biggest advice I can ever give anyone is just practice whatever it is that works for you in a way that allows you to become clear about what's important to you. And
Mm.
then from that place you can choose accordingly. But I think we get so caught up in the tornado, right? Like a hurricane tornado, call it what you want. But that is, it's how can you see clearly? For those on podcasts, I mean, you can't see clearly in a tornado or a hurricane. And so to calm that storm, that is the way, right? Like it sound like Yoda, but that is the way for me. How
Yeah.
about you, Kristen? Is there something, what little tidbit can you share?
Well, I know I've shared this with you. I want to share it with our listeners as well. As you were saying that, I was flashing back to being in the kitchen, our kitchen in the office, the last 9 to 5 role I did have in HR. And I flew into the kitchen, right? I was a walking tornado. I'm not exaggerating about this. I was always busy. I was going from meeting to meeting. When I was in meetings, I was emailing. Doing all the things. I was just go, 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 had to get it done. I was their first ever HR director. I was the last person hired right before COVID hit. All the thoughts that I had really informed this super, super, super frenetic pace. I remember I have a very, very, very specific memory where I flew in the kitchen. The custodian was preparing. She was over by the microwave. My IT director was standing next to her getting his lunch ready. And I was so annoyed that they were just taking their time with their lunch. And I was like, who are these people who have time for lunch? And that was the thought. I didn't say that. I didn't say a word because I had to run in, grab my lunch out of the fridge, run back to my office, shut the door, and start in on my next meeting. So I share that because I want to really drive home the point that I was a walking tornado, and I am the total opposite of that now. Total opposite. I single task. I do a lot of research. I geek out on all of the latest research on behavioral science, on organizational psychology, on neuroscience. I love learning new things. And because it's given me so much hope, I know that we can rewire our brains. So that one fact has really helped me. And I've worked really hard to rewire my own brain. And I do that by single tasking. I don't have multiple tabs open. I'm not texting when I'm with a client. I am fully with my client. I am fully coaching them. And if I'm doing HR consulting, I am hella focused on that one task. And I am not worried about the next thing. And it just keeps me calm. It keeps me calm. So that's something that works for me. I also, going back to what you said earlier, I spend time mapping out my week. I spend time mapping, and I put in wiggle room because I tend to underestimate how long it is going to take me to do things. So I have to build in wiggle room. And I've also changed how I communicate with people. Conversations that used to go on and on and on. I remember that with employee relations in HR. And of course, clients can be that way too. Now that I'm a coach and a consultant, if somebody is just going on and on and on, and I hear that they're repeating themselves, right? If we allow an employee to go on and on and on and on and on for 2 to 3 hours in our office, there is a different way to still continue forward with love, to be ever present with that employee. But I call them high cues. There's a way to redirect the conversation and give the employee the power. It's, well, what do you want to be experiencing? It's high Q questions like that to shift their brain out of the drama, the I can't, I don't know how, and shift them into empowerment of, well, what do you want? Because those long employee relations conversations can therefore start to impact our other work that we have to do when we have to roll out a new HRIS system. So I just have really specific techniques and things that I've started doing. And for me, it's only been in the last 2 years, and I have a totally different life. And I just want that for every HR person out there who feels like No, it has to be go, go, go. You don't understand my situation. Well, Jen and I have been in HR for a combined total of 45 years. I promise you that we may not know the exact, but we do get it. And you're not alone. And we're here for you. Truly.
Yes, we are. And I love, there was a comment that came in that said how much we love how you tie in neuroscience to this work, because thank you for that. I think really recognizing how much we can gain by being curious and learning about our minds and how it works is, for you and for me and for so many others, so helpful. It's
it's helpful on a personal level. I also think it's helpful for the HR profession.
absolutely.
I think there's so
required
many practices. We get, everyone hates performance reviews. Well, they don't work because neuroscientists have proven that once a year conversation, that leading with fear, like, it doesn't have to be that way. So when we rethink things, when we retool performance management, when we start really getting to know our employees and understanding their why and aligning it with the organizational why, that is a concept that's been out there, but going about it differently. And, yes, HIPAA's there. Yes, we are not supposed to ask certain questions. But when we start bringing the human back to human resources, we experience less litigation. We experience more human connection. HR isn't out on some island somewhere feeling so freaking lonely. And neuroscientists, and it's only been in the last 40 years, so it's relatively new, but it's been proven. So we can truly change our approach to HR, but we can also change the HR profession and the impact and the ripple effect that we have on employees' lives, but how the organization operates as a whole as well. I don't know. I do geek out. I totally geek out because it changed my life. It totally changed my life.
Well, and I'm so thankful for it. No, I think it's exactly what makes this work so well is the knowledge that you bring, a little bit that I bring, but I think that geekiness, oh my gosh, I love that about you, Katherine. So don't go slowing yourself down.
The irony. Don't slow down. Don't slow down. Keep going. Keep it. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, Jen, any final advice for our listeners today? You usually just end things so beautifully. So I kind of geek out on this moment we're coming to.
Oh, no pressure. put it on the gallery. Not feeling well. No, I'm kidding. I'm so grateful for this conversation. Like every single time we talk, it's like I have new openings in terms of things that I hadn't thought about in certain ways.
Same.
And that's it, y'all. That is it. It's like the more that we can do to just open our minds up to the things that maybe we hadn't considered, especially when it comes to the nuttiness going on inside our own brains, that's a win. That's a win. And it doesn't have to be all at once. It can be just small, bricks at a time. And that's what this podcast is. And I could go on and on and on, but I think that we are doing that right here, right now. And for you listening, for you watching, thank you. You are doing the work on yourself that is going to work. We promise you that. So what about you, Katherine? Any final thoughts?
Nope, none at all. I want to leave it at that. I think I get so much from listening to you, and you really got me going with your answer to it starts with our inner game. And it just beautifully exemplifies the difference between you and me, that we're different humans, that we see things differently. And the way we see things right now is really useful for us. So there's no right or wrong. It's just figuring out what works for us. And I don't know, you've got me thinking. So I'll be thinking about that for the rest of the day. Same thing. I love these conversations. It gets my brain going. It just helps me stay hella focused on my mission and my purpose in this lifetime. And it just reinforces that Life truly does happen for us. I was meant to meet you. I was meant to do this podcast with you. And I'm forever, forever grateful for starting Mondays off with you. So thank you. Mwah. All right. Well, and for our listeners, just remember that today and every day truly, truly, truly is a great day to thrive and shine in HR. Have an amazing week.